This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, micro students. Professor George here. This is the third and final set of lecture PowerPoints I'm going to post about Chapter 13. And this is going to all be about game theory. Game theory is kind of fun. It was wildly talked about in the world for a while. It's not as much now as it used to be. So I want to put it in some sort of context. Forever we've learned, and in this textbook and almost all micro textbooks, we learn in the traditional economics that if people act in their own self-interest, if people are profit maximizing and consumers are utility maximizing, if people have good information, that we will all work and we will get the best outcome. Markets are efficient and we'll get the best outcome. So Johnny Nash, other people kind of founded game theory, but John Nash got the Nobel Prize in economics for game theory. If any of you guys have seen A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, he was playing Johnny Nash. John Nash was a very famous economist. My small claim to fame is that my teacher of microeconomics, my teacher, Collie Roth, his teacher was Johnny Nash. So, and my teacher told me lots of stories about John Nash. What John Nash was trying to do is try to explain how we have markets, they're operating, but where we end up at is often a suboptimal, not an optimization, a suboptimal outcome. And he wanted to explain how it is that people can act in their best interest, can do what they think looks like the right thing, and we can end up at an outcome in the market that's suboptimal. So that's the context of where game theory and Nash equilibrium in particular come from. So game theory, I'll just set it up for you, and then I'm going to show you how to read the payoff matrix. Here, let me pull up the PowerPoints real quick. I don't want to do PowerPoints long, though. So hold on, let me just get to where I need to get to. So game theory was developed in the 40s by these two people to analyze economics, military, political science, all different kinds of things. And like I said in the last video, oligopolistic industries are different in that there's so much interdependence. So you really have to have a strategy where you're thinking, if I do this, they'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then what if they do that, and then what if I do this? So it's not usually just a one-shot thing. It's about all of the mutual interdependence of these two or three, usually three, big players. So I'm going to show you what they call as a payoff matrix. And this is our system for analyzing it. So you're going to have two people. Usually we think of it as a duopoly. In there's really complicated, interesting game theory stuff, but we're just going to do just the basics. We're going to do just the basics. So we're going to have two players, firm A and firm B. We're going to have it so that we have a payoff matrix and people know their payoff. And they're going to see how they make choices. Two firms, four possible outcomes. I really dislike how your text shows the payoff matrix. So I redid them in my PowerPoints in your homework a little bit differently that I'm hoping, feel pretty confident will be easier to read. So I stole this off the internet somewhere, and this is a payoff matrix. Now let me take the time to go through this payoff matrix and help you understand what you're looking at. I think I'm going to look at it somewhere else, so hold on. I'm going to go over here. I pulled it up over here, and then that way I can point at things. So this is what your payoff matrix is going to look like in all oligopolistic industries, and I want to teach you how to read them. So this is two players. We have two players here. We have Starbucks, and we have San Francisco, or whoever that is, coffee. Two players right here. And we're only looking at two choices. They're looking at, should they advertise all around town or should they not advertise all around town? You can see in this example how if Starbucks advertises and the other people don't advertise, the other people will be at a disadvantage. So this is looking at what they should do. All right. The payoffs, the payoffs are these amounts. These are amounts of money. I got distracted by that phone call. So Starbucks has two choices. They can advertise or they can not advertise. They can advertise or not advertise. And SF Coffees has the exact same thing. And these payoffs are in revenue. So this corner here, this is all Starbucks payoffs. These are all Starbucks payoffs. This corner here, these are all Starbucks payoffs. This corners here are the, I just type it easier. These are the SF. These are the SF payoffs. I'm not going to do this every time, but just because it's the first time you guys are reading these. This corner here is the SF. All right, so here I want to teach you how to read these. If Starbucks chooses to not advertise, they're either going to make $15 millions, whatever, in revenue, or 10. Those are the two things that they can make if they don't advertise. If neither one of them advertise, they're both going to make 15. If neither one of them advertise, they're going to make 15. Let's just so you'll read this. If you're here, Starbucks is making 15. Do they have an incentive to change their behavior? Do they have an incentive to change their behavior? Well, yes, they do. Because right now, they're not advertising and making 15. They're not advertising and making 15. If they decide to advertise, Starbucks, they can make 20. So then we'll move to this spot. We'll move to this spot. Now we're here. Starbucks is making 20 and SF Coffee is making 10. Do either one of them have a urge to change their behavior? Well, the only thing at Starbucks can do is go back and forth between 15 and 20, right? They're going to want to be here at 20. Now, SF Coffees, if they want to change their behavior, if they don't advertise, they make 10. If they do advertise, they make 12. So they have an incentive to change their behavior. So then they end up here. They end up here in this answer. This answer is 12 and 12. Now let's look and see if they have a desire to change their behavior. So for SF Coffees, they're advertising and making 12. The only thing they have a choice of is advertising or not advertising. So SF Coffee is making 12. If they choose, the only choice they have would be to not advertise, they would make 10. So SF Coffee has no incentive to change its behavior. What about Starbucks? Starbucks can either choose to not advertise or to advertise. Right now, Starbucks is making 12. They're making 12. The only thing that they could choose to do differently would be to move over here to not advertise, and they would make 10. So 12 is where they're going to end up. This is called a Nash equilibrium because it's stable. Because it's stable. It's a stable equilibrium. Do you see that this is not the optimal outcome? They're both acting in their both self-interest. They're doing what looks like the right thing to do, and they end up at a suboptimal outcome. What would be the optimal outcome? The optimal outcome would be this this up here, you know, this circle up here would be the optimal outcome. They would both make 15, as whereas down here they both make 12. But do you see why it is not likely that they will end up here unless they're part of a cartel and they could break your legs or something? I'm being dramatic, but if you're here, if you're at this spot right here, SF Coffees, if they cheat, like if they get together and say, we're not going to advertise, if they if SF Coffee says, well, I'm going to just start sending out some postcards or something, they could make 20. But if they if they cheat and start making 20, then Starbucks is going to go down to 10. So then what are they going to do? They're going to advertise too. So they're both going to end up here. Same thing up here. If they're at the 15.15, both Starbucks and SF Coffee has an incentive to cheat, right? Because it could go from 15 to 20, it could go from 15 to 20. So unless there's a credible threat, we'll talk about that in a minute, you're going to end up at a suboptimal outcome. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So Johnny Nash explained its Nash equilibrium, won him a Nobel Prize, about how the outcome that you end up with is really not the best outcome for everybody involved. Now let me teach you a few more. Erase all drawings. Oh, we didn't erase all drawings. Now, I didn't erase all drawings. Let's do this. Hold on one second. Maybe I'll do it like that. Sorry. And listen, it needs much. I'll figure out a way to do it. Now, I want to talk to you about what a dominant theory is. I mean, a dominant strategy. So a dominant strategy, one of your study guide questions, but it also just makes sense. A dominant strategy is a strategy that you would pursue regardless. If you have a dominant strategy, is that you have one choice that regardless of what the other person chooses, it's going to be your best strategy. So if you were Starbucks, what I want to know is, does Starbucks have a dominant strategy? Well, if they don't, Starbucks I'm talking about, if they don't advertise, they're either going to end up with 15 or 10, depending on what SF Coffee does. If they do advertise, they're going to end up at 20 or 12. So if they don't advertise and SF Coffee doesn't advertise, they could get 15. But 20 is better than 15. So in both instances, if they don't advertise, the two outcomes that you could possibly have would be 15 or 10 if they don't advertise. Well, 20 is greater than 15 and 12 is greater than 10. So to advertise is Starbucks' dominant strategy. Now let's look at SF Coffee. SF Coffee, if they don't advertise, they could be 15 or 10. Those are the two possible outcomes. If they do advertise, they could be 20 or 12. So because 20 is greater than 15 and 12 is greater than 10, they also have a dominant strategy. So if both parties have a dominant strategy, they're going to have a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium is they're going to pursue this strategy no matter what, and the outcome is stable. Once you get there, you will not have any tendency to move from there. Again, once you get here to this circle right here, if you are Starbucks, the only thing you can choose to do is to not advertise, and you would have less money. If you were SF Coffees, the only thing you could choose to do would be to not advertise, and you would have less money. So there's no incentive to move away from this spot once you get there. That's a Nash equilibrium. A dominant strategy is where you have one outcome is better no matter what than the other. Good. Let me pull up another slide I made real quick. So prisoner's dilemma. I'm really happy that I found some really good videos and some really short ones. Ironically, one of the videos I posted is just like a guy in a t-shirt talking about all of this stuff. He did an excellent job. So let me tell you what prisoner's dilemma is very quickly, but watch the short video I have up about it. It's really good. So prisoner's dilemma, let me look at you. Prisoner's dilemma is just this. It's basic idea. Is if me and my sister Leah, we rob a bank. We rob the bank and we get away, and the police catch us. and we are not able to talk to one another. And honestly, the police don't have much to be able to prove that we committed this crime. So they're going to give me a choice. They're going to say, Sarah, if you confess to this crime, you're still going to go to jail for a little while, but you're not going to go to jail for a long while because you're giving state's evidence, you're confessing, so we're going to reward you for that by lowering your sentence. So I'd still go to jail, but not for that long. My other option that I know is to not say anything. Then they go to my sister Leah's cell and they say, Leah, this is the thing we just told Sarah, that if she confesses, she's going to have a lighter sentence. We'll do the same for you. If she confesses and you don't, then you're going to get the full 10 years or whatever. You're going to go to jail for the longest period of time. So both my sister Leah and I have two choices: to confess and get a lighter sentence, or to say nothing and not go to jail at all. We know that the best outcome would be for both of my sisters and I to be mum, to not say anything. But we don't have the ability to collude. We can't talk to each other. We can't like say, hey, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. So what happens is we both end up giving up our sisters, and we both go to jail. That's kind of the heart of what prisoner's dilemma is because you can't collude. And that's the whole thing about oligopolies that's difficult, is you can't know exactly what your other player is going to do. So it's a good, if we were in classroom, I would do some prisoner's dilemmas to show you what I mean. But it's a good, please watch those videos. It was a big deal in the world when Johnny Nash came up with it. So here's another example where we have firm A and firm B. They can choose to make cell phones or smartphones. Both of them have that choice. Now, this is my setup, and I hope that my color coordinating will help you. So firm A, their payoffs are all there in purple, and firm B, right, firm A, they're in purple, and firm B, they're all in green. So let's take a glance at how we can read this payoff matrix. Let's just pick a spot. We can pick any spot you want. Let's start in this spot. In this spot, firm B is making smartphones and firm A is making cell phones. Firm B is making $12 million. Firm B is making -$2 million. So clearly, firm A needs to change its behavior. So now firm A is going to say, I'm not going to sell cell phones, I'm going to sell smartphones. They're already selling smartphones, so you end up in this quadrant right here. Okay, you end up here, 3 and 3. Now, is this a Nash equilibrium? Do either one of these players have a desire to change their behavior? So firm A can choose this box or this box, right? The only thing they can change is their behavior here. So if you're at this box, firm A is not going to move here because that would be negative. Now, firm B, they're here at smartphones. If they change their behavior, the only thing they can do is go to cell phones, which would be a move here. But firm B isn't going to go do that because they move from 3 to -2. So they're not going to do that. So this is a stable Nash equilibrium because once you arrive here, there's no incentive by either firm to change their behavior. One more time to show you that. The purple is the firm A's outcome. They have $3 million. The only choice they have at this point is to change their behavior from smartphones to cell phones. They can move up here. If they moved up here, they would have -2, so they wouldn't want to do that. Firm B is the green outcomes. If they make smartphones and firm A makes smartphones, they can make $3 million. If they change their behavior at this point, the only thing available for them to do is change their behavior is to go from smartphones to cell phones. If they do that, they're losing money. So what you see is a suboptimal outcome. This is a stable Nash equilibrium. Once you get there, you're not going to move. See, now this would be a better outcome for them. This would be a better outcome for them both to make cell phones, and they both would make $10 million. But if you are at this spot right here, do either firm have an incentive to cheat? So, you get together and you say, hey, let's make cell phones, we spit on it, okay, we're going to do this, right? And then firm B says, I'm going to keep telling them I'm going to sell cell phones, but I'm going to start making smartphones on the side. So he moves over here. Firm B has clear incentive to move here. And when they move there, cell phones goes to -2. Same thing with the purple firm, firm A. If you're here, you make an agreement, you're both going to make cell phones. There's such an incentive to cheat. Because if you cheated, you would end up here. And you don't want to do that either. You don't want to do that either. So here we are, suboptimal outcome. Let's see, do either one of them, so the difficulty with colluding is about having a credible threat, right? A credible threat is defined as a threat that you make against somebody that if you carry it out, it won't hurt you. So if you say, oh, my credible threat is I'm going to start lowering my prices, well, that's going to hurt me. That's not a credible threat, right? A credible threat is only a threat where if you do it, it won't hurt you. One last thing before I leave here, let's look and see what a dominant outcome is, right? Do we have a dominant outcome? A dominant strategy. Do we have a dominant strategy? Dominant strategy for firm B. Well, for firm B, if they make cell phones, they can either make 10 or -2. If they make smartphones, they can make 12 or 3. And you can see that 12 is greater than 10 and 3 is greater than -2. So the dominant strategy for firm B is smartphones. And then what about firm A? Firm A is the same thing. Firm A, they can either make $10 million or -2. If they do smartphones, they can make 12 and 3. Do they have a dominant strategy? Yes, they have a dominant strategy because 12 is more than 10, greater than, and 3 is more than -2. So both firm A and firm B have a dominant strategy. That dominant strategy leads them to a Nash equilibrium, which is stable. There's no tendency to move once you get there, but it's suboptimal. It's not the best outcome that you could have. So remember, what are they trying to explain? They're trying to explain how people behave when there's interdependence, which we don't have with monopoly or monopolistic competition or pure competition. You want to look and see if they have a dominant strategy. You want to be able to read your payoff matrix. And if they collude, where will they end up? Well, if they collude, they'd want to end up here. The hard thing about colluding is there's such a strong incentive to cheat. So this one does have a Nash equilibrium. Let's look at one more thing. Real quick, one more thing. I just want to see if I've covered everything. You know how to read your payoff matrix. You know the setup of the game. You know what a dominant strategy is. It's the strategy they would pick that would be better no matter what the other person has. This is exactly what we just went through that I had on my other slide. So we went through this. There's policy implications. There's about how we're going to enforce. Is there collusion? This is a hard one. It's hard to figure out with the dominant strategies how firms will try to collude, but not illegally. If you have games with dominant solutions, you're often going to end up in a prisoner's dilemma situation. The maximum criterion, I don't have an example of that, but it's just the idea that if you know that your rival is out to screw you, I mean, that's their main goal in life, is to hurt you, then you're going to pick the solution that's the less bad of each of them. I don't have an example of that. I already did this one. I did it again. Yes, there is a dominant. They both have a dominant strategy. Yes, there is a Nash equilibrium. We know where they're going to end up if they could collude. We know where they're going to end up if they don't collude. The difficulty about the colluding outcome is how do you motivate them not to cheat? A credible threat is a threat that if you carry it out, it's not going to hurt you. A zero-sum game, you hear this, positive sum game, zero-sum game. A zero-sum game is there's winners and there's losers. Both people can't win. You think about, I watched the Final Four basketball. Baylor or Gonzaga were going to win. It can't be that they both win. One's going to be a winner, one's going to be a loser. Okay? When do we hear about positive sum games? That's usually when we talk about trade, comparative advantage in trade. You can trade and both people can be made better off. Both people can be better off. So sometimes people think about, and this has been used a lot in war and negotiations, can we have an outcome where both people win? Zero-sum games is they don't. So look at this payoff matrix. So is there a dominant strategy? Well, let's take one at a time. For firm A, 10 is bigger than, if firm A chooses strategy 1, they're either going to get 10 or negative 2. They choose strategy 1, they're going to get 10 or negative 2. If they choose strategy 2, they're going to get 4 or 7. Is there a dominant strategy? Well, 10 is bigger than 4, but 7 is bigger than negative 2. So for firm A, there is not a dominant strategy. Let's look at firm B. If firm B picks strategy 1, their options are 0 or 6. If they choose strategy 2, they're either going to get negative 2 or 3. They do have a dominant strategy. Their strategy is going to be strategy 1. So if you're here, in this circle here, you'll see who has an incentive to change their behavior. Well, firm B has no desire to change their behavior because all they can do is 1 or 2. So they could go to 2, but they would be losing money. Does firm A have an incentive to change their behavior? No, because if they go to strategy 2, they're going to be less money. So this outcome is a zero-sum outcome because there's a winner and there's a loser. Let's just say we start here. If we start here where they're both doing strategy 2, does firm A have a desire to change its behavior? Well, if they're both here, firm A can change its behavior to change into strategy 1. They're not going to do that because they're going to go to negative 2. If they're here, does firm B have a desire to change its behavior? It would be yes, that does, to go here. So you go from here to here. Once you're here, we just did this one. Firm A is going to want to go up here. Firm B is not going to want to go up there, but firm A is going to go up there, and then they're back at this point. And this point is a Nash equilibrium in that it's stable. B is not going to move, A is not going to move, but it's in a situation where there's a winner and there's a loser. We're not going to do the repeating games. There's several, if you're reading the textbook, which I always hope you do, they go into a lot more depth than I do. But this is as far as we're going to go. A perfectly contestable market is a market where it's not really oligopoly exactly. It's a market where it's easy to enter and exit. The capital market is the best example. If you can put your money in different places and get a return, it's easy to enter and exit. There can't be a substantial sunk cost. If you're in this situation, you can make an argument that if you have a perfectly contestable market, you're going to get the benefits of perfect competition, even though you don't have perfect competition, because they're going to try to behave in a way to discourage other people from entering the industry. They're going to want to produce at lowest cost, charge a low cost, economic profits are eliminated. There's not much instance of perfectly contestable markets out there. The capital market's probably the only one I can think of. So don't forget that when you're studying games, oh, this is another really good graph, really good chart I made. This is a good one to print out and have next to you when you take the quiz. We've had 4 different market structures, and we want to look at how they compare to one another. How do they compare to one another? So perfectly competitive, monopolistically competitive, oligopoly, and pure monopoly. I listed in this way. It's different than the book because this is how they go from perfect competition to no competition. Number of firms, many, 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 few, one. Frequency and reality, rare, widespread, a lot of them, rare. Barriers to entry, none, minor, varies, likely to be high. Is it good for the public? Perfect competition is great for the public. Monopolistic competition is not great, but they do make a lot of options available to us. Oligopoly, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And monopoly, we know that the output is too little. They don't make enough because they want to restrict the supply to drive up the price. Long run profit, not possible in these 2 more competitive industries. Sometimes it is available in oligopolies, and in monopolies, they'll be high. Equilibrium conditions, this is the best one. When the price equals the marginal cost, you're really happy as a consumer because that means that you're paying what it costs them to make it. It's good here for consumers. The rest of these are not nearly as good. So I hope I've made the point that game theory is just fun. Hope you can take the time to read through the book. I watched all the videos last night to see how long it would take me. It took me 30 minutes to watch all the videos I posted. I love learning things from YouTube. Try getting yourself a cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is you drink and watching those and see if it helps. Always looking for your feedback. Let me know how this video helps you. Till next time.